Hey, it's Anthony Whitaker here, and welcome to today's episode of the Grow My Salon Business podcast. And whether this is your first time or perhaps you're a regular listener, thank you for tuning in today. Every week, I either bring a guest on the show or I'll dive into a new idea or perhaps revisit the foundations of what it takes to succeed in the salon industry today. We'll feature new startups and new ideas and initiatives from established people and brands. Some of them might at first sound a little bit too niche, but we'll explore why they're worth keeping an eye on, how they'll reshape client expectations, and how they'll be central to the future of the salon industry and perhaps even become the new normal. With every episode, I will aim to bring you practical and actionable opportunities that you can run with today. And in case you don't already know, video versions of our podcast are now also available on our YouTube channel. So if you want to put faces to the names, then head on over to Grow My Salon Business on YouTube and like and subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, then remember to leave us a review or share this podcast with those that you know will benefit from this episode. So with all that said, on with today's episode. Today's guests are Leilani Macedo, a seasoned salon owner, and Charles Brown, a tech entrepreneur who is passionate about applying artificial intelligence to real-world problems. And together they co-founded Clics to create a solution for the problems around professional hair color. So if you're interested in tech, entrepreneurship, the salon business, and what could be the future of professional hair color, then this episode is definitely for you. In today's podcast, we're going to discuss the problems with the existing model around professional hair color and how Clics uses AI to solve those problems, as well as pricing and automated hair color inventory management and how Clics is totally changing the professional hair color game, and so much more. So without further ado, welcome to the show, hairdresser Leilani Macedo and tech innovator Charles Brown, co-founders of Clics.
Hi.
Hey, Anthony, how are you?
I'm very good. It's really exciting. I'm really excited about talking, about Clics because I am a hairdresser, and some of the challenges that you've addressed with this are things that have taken a long time to, come to the surface. So yeah, this is going to be exciting, I know, for a lot of hairdressers. Now, I really didn't want to start with how the two of you met, but I'm going to because it's such an important part of everything else that follows afterwards. So, Charles, do you want to just start at the top here with how the two of you initially met and what came from that chance encounter?
Absolutely. It really was a fateful experience in a number of ways. And I was living up in Seattle, Washington, in the United States at the time. And unfortunately, one of the things that happens in life is you lose your parents. My mother had contracted pancreatic cancer. And so I decided to stop running the company that I was running and go down and help her with end of life. And so I moved, and of course I had had a barber for a very long time, needed a haircut, didn't have one anymore, and I had spied a barber shop round down the street, and so I decided to go get a haircut as a walk-in. So I was a virtual walk-in, and walked in, sat down, and they ushered me over to Leilani's chair. So I sat down and she came over and greeted me, and we started talking, and she's asking me, of course, all the classic things that hairdressers ask their guests when they start to service them. She started asking me questions about myself, what's your background, where you're from, and I started to tell her I came down from Seattle. And what was interesting was the questions she started to ask as I started to talk about what I did became much more directed. And so I'm listening to these questions going, I think she has an agenda. I wasn't sure. And so finally, when she learned I was a tech entrepreneur, she said, well, I've been working on an idea in the salon industry. Would you mind if I share it with you? And by this time, I had developed 10 businesses, all technology oriented and business models. And so I literally looked over my shoulder. I looked her straight in the eye because she was standing behind me. I looked her in the eyes and I said, tell me what you got. And it was like pushing the on button. She just lit up and instantly described 6 problems she wanted to solve in the salon industry and how she was going to do it using technology. And my first thought was, this is $1 billion idea. My second thought, I didn't tell her at the time, was this is what I'm supposed to do.
Mm.
And that was, just a profound experience, honestly. And then we continued to talk for the duration. And what was so impressive to me was that we carried on this extended conversation about the salon industry, being a salon owner, being a stylist, the problems that she was experiencing, all while her hands were just whizzing around my head with these scissors and hairs flying everywhere, right? And so she was multitasking in a super impressive way and having this incredibly articulate business conversation. So I was super impressed.
Wow.
So, I liked the idea so much that I literally I went back and I got on the internet and I started doing market research. And I'm going, wow, look at that. Oh, wow, look at that. Oh my gosh, look at that. This is such an interesting industry, right? And so I thought, okay, I gotta, go learn more. So about a week later, I come back into the salon, and so now I've gone from the walk-in to the redo, right? I'm sitting there and she was out for a break, comes back in, sees me, and I stand up and I said, "Hi, do you remember me?" And she looks at me and she looks up at my hair and she says, "Yes, I remember, of course. Is your hair okay?" And
First
I
thing
had
I
not thought about my hair since she cut it, right? I'm like, "Oh, hair. Yeah, I have hair. No, my hair's fine.
yeah.
I'm here to talk to you about your business idea." And I asked her to coffee. And so that was the beginning.
Well, it's a fantastic story. I think there's so much in that story that we could but we don't have time to. We could go off in so many tangents about female entrepreneurship. I think that's incredible. About never giving up. Because you'd obviously been nurturing those ideas and those frustrations for a while, and also about serendipity. That sometimes how two people meet, how the universe sort of conspires that these two people can meet and something really special comes out of it, and that is clicks, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Just to kind of steal the show a little bit further and to highlight, to your point, Leilani's uh, drive and focus. She had decided at one point that she had built this little prototype. She had actually attracted three phenomenal engineers, including her brother, to help her build a prototype. And there was a point in time at which she said, "Okay, I need to go find a CEO who can help build, fund a company." And so she literally at that point decided to sell her salon and she moved from Reno, Nevada to San Diego. Get this. And because she had been doing a lot of obviously women's hair and it was their husbands who were the CEO, she decided to go back, incredible, to barber school, get her license and start cutting hair in a barber shop to meet a CEO and
Really,
moved to
wow.
San Diego to do it.
Oh
Incredible,
my
just
God.
incredible.
See, that's what I mean. There's a whole podcast of that alone. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
hats off to you. Now, look, I want to jump straight in the deep end and sort of set the scene for the listener because at this point in time, they actually don't know much of what we're talking about. But I think that over the years, and I said to you before we started recording, that I've also been that person that a lot of hairdressers have gone into the local hardware store or Home Depot, whatever you call it, and over the years, they've stood there looking at the paint machine, the dispenser, the paint mixer that has the primary colors and the secondary colors in it. And they've had some paint mixed up to match this color swatch that they've got. And over the years, myself included, have stood there looking at it thinking, wow, that's incredible. Imagine if they could do that with hair color. And I've been in the industry a long time, and other people have had the same idea, and some people have tried it, and those things have come and gone with varying degrees of success. There's still some of them in the market today that are succeeding to whatever degree. But I really do think that the way that you've approached it and the use of AI and obviously the technology aspect that you bring to it, that I think you've sort of really nailed this because all the research I've been doing before we got on the podcast, it's like, oh my God, this is fantastic, all the stuff that it does. So, that's what we're going to dig into, dear listener. But what I want to start with is I just want you to give just the top line, the sort of overview. I don't mind who answers the question, just the overview of what Clics is about and what makes it different. And then I can then dig into the detail, so to speak.
Yeah, Leilani's the vision child for the business. I mean, it was really her idea, and she experienced all of the pain of the problems she decided to want to solve as a salon owner. So I think it's only appropriate to let her share that part.
Yeah,
Cool.
sure. I'll start. So actually, Anthony, the fact that you brought up the Home Depot Paint Center is exactly when I was standing there one day and I was watching what they were doing. You know, you brought the swatch up, they input it into the computer, and then showed it. You know, put all of the pieces in, and then he pressed go, and then he walked away. And when he walked away, he was able to help other customers. And so I had an aha moment. I was like, if I could have something mixing for me, that would free me up to be able to go and get my clients a drink, or, you know, go and start getting all of my other foils together and other things I need for the service together. And so I was literally standing there and I was like, wow, that could be really cool. So I went back to my salon, had a really busy Saturday after that event, and just was standing there at the end of the day. And it was literally, there was bowls of color in the sink. There was, you know, empty racks of color all over the place. And I thought to myself, I'm literally standing in a money pit. I need to be able to fix this. And then I remembered, oh, Home Depot, right? I could take what we're already using, mixable hair color cans, and use the internet to tie it all together and create a platform. And so that was in 2006 when I owned my salon. And I actually, it wouldn't let me go after that. And it was a constant, like, what about that idea? What about that idea? And every time I walked into my salon, it was just starting to weigh so heavy on me. Every time it's like, you can fix this. And so again, it's an old problem. Others have tried, but I do think that we were at the point when we founded the company in 2016 that hairdressers were more appreciative and accepting of technology, and the technology itself had to come to a point where we would be able to build this platform and make it smaller. Because could you imagine trying to build a dispenser for 175 colors? It would be as big as an ATM machine or a refrigerator, and nobody has space for that in their salons. And so by using the mixable hair color and the internet to tie it all together into the technology, that's how we get it into a table size dispenser. And then all of the other great stuff, the business model that goes along with it, that is, you know, Charles' brilliant mind, his business mind, that came up with that to basically disrupt the entire way that we charge for hair color and deliver it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Where did the name come from? Clics.
Yep. So that's me. I was sitting at my computer and I was like, what am I trying to solve? And it literally just came to me, Color Lab inventory control system, because I wanted it to be easy to say, rememberable, and define what we were actually solving.
Oh, it's
So,
good. It's
so
good.
that's
So it's an acronym. Color Lab. What was it?
inventory control
Inventory
system.
control system. Color
Yep.
Lab inventory control system. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Charles, can I ask you, why do you think that the color dispensers haven't caught on in the way that they should have?
It's a great question. I think first and foremost, to Leilani's point, if I've got 120 tones of permanent color,
Hmm.
and then I've got another 100 tones, let's say, of demi, where do you put all of that, right? And how many tubes deep are you going to be able to hold in any whatever apparatus you build? So it's a very intractable problem. And when we started developing it, of course, one of the things you do is you look at the intellectual property. We now have patents all over the world for our technology, and we needed to understand what existing previous art, as they call it in that space, existed. And we did find one device where they attempted to build a dispenser for the developer, right, for the lotion. And the problem with that particular approach is that it is only half the problem, right? And it's the commoditized portion of the problem because it sells for maybe a penny a gram. And
Hmm.
so there's no economic advantage for automating one component without automating the others. And so what Leilani had done is realized, of course, that that was an intractable problem and that the only way you could really solve this was to create a mixable line. And she had already conceptualized 30 components total that could produce millions of colors, but only if you had a computer controlled dispensing technology, right?
Mm.
That would allow you to do fine control. And so part of the wonderful story that Leilani tells is that when she first, the idea grabbed her, and now she's gone on and she's starting to solve it. She goes out and she bought, a few tubes of color. She went to her brother, who's a phenomenal mechanical engineer and our third founder, and she said, "Could you build?" He showed it to him. "Could you build a dispenser that dispenses color out of this tube?" And he said, "No."
Mhm.
And so he said, "Is there anything else that exists?" And she thought, the Goldwell pressurized canister popped into her mind. And so she went and got one of those and brought it back to him. She said, "What about this?" And he said, "Yep, this will work." And so that was she already had those foundations.
Yeah.
And what would end up happening is we would learn that her brilliance of creating those 30 components was the magic that would make the whole system work from just being able to reduce the inventory. And I want to share one other just absolutely brilliant thing that Leilani came up with, which was that she looked at permanent color, she looked at the demi-permanent color, she realized that the demi-permanent color is supposed to look the same as the permanent. They don't always actually do that.
Mm.
And then she conceptualized an idea that if you could create a single canister of a component that would reduce the pH, you could create a permanent line and then just use squirt in a little bit of that one component to turn it into a demi, and
Mm.
it would be the same color. And
Yeah.
and, and that idea was just, breakthrough in
Huge.
terms of
Yeah,
what we're able
huge.
to accomplish. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to ask a question, Leilani. I'm very naive about color. I'm a hairdresser, but I'm not a colorist. I've never done color. Okay, I've always been a cutting specialist. But I know enough to know that there are three primary colors and three secondary colors. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so why do they need 20 different ingredients and not just six different, canisters with the color in? Um, I'm imagining that maybe other people think that the same way. So, what's the answer to that? Why do you need 20?
It's a great question, actually, but we're building it off of color science, right? Primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. And so being able to have each of those in a canister, actually, Anthony, it goes back to the speed of how quickly you can dispense too. Because if you're dispensing a tertiary color out of one canister versus having to have two, then that will actually get your color result for you quicker.
Okay.
And so that was one of the tenets, because obviously my engineers asked me the very same question: why can't we just do this with fewer canisters?
Okay.
And as we've matured with the AI technology, though, it does in fact look like we will be able to eventually do that. But I was using a system based off of an Aveda color line because I had an Aveda salon. And that's one of the systems I was already currently using that was in market, that I wanted to use because I thought it would be an easier uptake for people to get used to using that, because mixable color is not taught in schools. It's all
Mm.
pre-blended shades. And so to get that skill set going and to get comfortable with it, I thought it would be easier to do it with the color wheel, which is something that hairstylists are already used to using as a tool.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall when you were cutting Charles' hair, because I want to know what the frustrations were that you had, what the operational inefficiencies that you had about the existing status quo. So, if you were to say, well, there were these five things that I said, bang, 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 these are the problems that I'm trying to solve, what were those things?
So it was inventory management. It was the bane of my existence. It was the amount of waste. There was just so much waste. Like I mentioned earlier, in the sink, there were bowls full of color literally going down the drain, and it was impacting my bottom line by 30 to 40%. And so it was cost savings. It was also color choice. Like I really enjoyed having the ability to custom blend my colors with the Aveda system. And so I really, really enjoyed that customization. And then antiquated tools. The last innovation for hair colorists actually in the salon was the digital scale, which was launched in 1980. And so when I looked at all of these things coming together, I was like, how come there isn't any advanced tools for a hair colorist? This is scientific. You need to know how to mix everything correctly so you don't get banding in the hair. Why don't we have an advanced tool? And so when I was speaking to Charles, I had pulled out those, key things and issues that I wanted to solve. And then again, I told him how I wanted to solve it. I wanted to use the internet, and he was an internet entrepreneur, so he got that immediately. But he also had done another business in the nutraceuticals, so vitamin industry, where he had already created an inventory management system. And so it really clicked for him. When I mentioned it, he's like, oh yeah, I've done something similar. So during our conversation, he also shared that with me.
That's really interesting, because that was one of the things I was going to ask you about, Charles. Were you looking at all these problems and thinking, oh, I've solved that, or seen how that can be solved in another context? So that was interesting what you just said about the vitamin industry, that you'd seen something that had solved a similar problem, obviously with a different product. Do you want to speak to us about that for a minute?
Yeah, exactly. And so in a prior business I had developed, I had come across the nutraceutical industry, vitamins and supplements, and certainly had been in a store or two, and observed that they had thousands and thousands of SKUs, right? Unique products.
Mm.
And to Leilani's point, that inventory management was the bane of their existence. So what we essentially did was built a little device that would record all their sales activity and give them an inventory management tool and let them automate all their orders so products would just show up. And then we even connected a financial services partnership to that, UPS Capital back in the day, so that we supplied credit to the retailers for those purchases. So in that business, we captured $500 million a year worth of purchasing power across a very, very large network of independent retailers, which Salon is an independent retailer. So when she shared the idea, I was immediately able to go, okay, fragmented industry, lots of small retailers, okay, numbers of manufacturers, inventory management and ordering problem, and how do you automate that? And so she had a very similar idea for her industry. I had already implemented it, so I was able really quickly to the point I shared earlier, go, this is $1 billion idea, because the pain that salon owners, as we all know, experience is just phenomenal. And to Leilani's point, when you worked all day and you're the owner, right? So you've got that yoke of ownership, which Anthony, I know you know. And now, while everybody else goes out to get dinner or have a drink, you're left doing the inventory,
Mm.
right? And that wears on you. And if you don't do it well, and this is a key piece, if that product isn't there when that stylist goes to serve their client, what do? They improvise. They go to the back room, they talk to the other stylists, they quickly find the things that they can pre-mix color that they then try to blend together to get as close to the color as they can to service their client. That creates mistakes. Clients get unhappy, and then you lose customers as a result. And so the inventory management that she's solved turns out to be such a fundamental problem that affects so many aspects of the business that it was just, it was the same reason I solved it, in the other industry.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. I think salon owners will be listening to this and thinking, this sounds great. I'm absolutely loving it. I can see it addresses all these problems. It's better for the environment, etc. as well. Um, but they'll be sitting there thinking, but what about the efficacy and performance of the product? Whose product is it? Now, I know you mentioned earlier on before we started recording that in fact, you may have mentioned it since as well. You talked about how you've got a lot of patented product knowledge, technology, etc. out there. But assuming that you don't have a huge R&D facility with scientists and factories and raw materials coming in by the lorry load to develop the raw product, the color, basically, for want of a better word,
Right.
where
Right.
does the color product come from?
We started by going out and finding a world-renowned hair color chemist. There was only a few in the world,
Mm,
and it was one of the biggest challenges we had. We were able to attract one who was, interestingly enough, at the time, close to retirement and didn't want to do another, 120, 150, tone pre-mixed color line.
mm,
And we sat down with him, and I remember challenging him, and I said, look, this technology with the right mixable color line is going to revolutionize the industry. And this is an opportunity that few people get, and that's how we were able to hook him.
Yeah, he has formulated for the best, for L'Oreal, for Goldwell. He actually moved from Germany when he worked for Goldwell and set up the factory that our color is manufactured in. And so he knew that like the back of his hand. It was actually the way that we got them to work with us because we were a startup, obviously. And so having him do the formulation for us is key. And also, Anthony, I would just like to state that we're not using anything exotic. We're not using anything that's different than what any other color company is using. And so we are using industry standard quality ingredients, and it really is getting hairdressers to understand that and to get them to just even think about changing color lines is so dynamic and so difficult because there is a lot of pain that goes with it, right? Because there's no
yeah,
Pantone in this industry, right?
yeah,
But as a hairdresser, I can guarantee
mm,
you that I would not put a product out into the market that doesn't perform because I know the pain on the other side of, well,
mm,
what if it doesn't perform?
yeah,
And so really it was like I had told Charles over and over and over again that, we were having problems with the color, of course, because oxidative chemistry isn't as bulletproof as we're led to believe it is. It is actually very touchy chemistry. And so I was speaking with Charles and I was like, it's not performing. We can't move forward until we figure out what is going on.
yeah,
And so Charles and I literally we wrestled it to the ground, literally daily and weekly, working with the factory to fine tune and figure out what was going on with it. Because we did have a failure in 2018. I tested it, everything was performing in a small lab batch. But then when we scaled it up into the bigger equipment, it sheared it apart and it basically fell apart. And so we had to go back to the drawing board. And I was not going to relent on this because I understand that it has to perform. Hairdressers work by time, right? You can't reduce our problem. Not having something perform is a problem. So
yeah,
yes, I can let you know from my perspective and from what is in the market currently that it does perform, and just I think getting people to understand how to change color lines. How do you talk to it? How do you do it on the backside with your clients? And so you have to be excited about it. And I'll let Charles talk to the part about how we've solved being able to make changing color lines easier
mm,
because we've built tools into the app that will actually help you formulate. And one last point on that, people think that this is just it's all too complicated. Well, what's not that complicated is on the app. Just like pulling a tube off the shelf, all you're doing now is pushing a button on the app, but you
mm,
can still get a pre-blended color that we've already created. And so we're trying to demystify that it's not that complex, and we're hoping that the tools that we're building
Yeah.
will help people to be able to make that transition much easier.
Okay. Charles, I'm going to ask you that question that Leilani sort of prefaced, but I want to come at it from a slightly different angle. She used that word Pantone, and I'm sure that 90% of people listening to this will understand what that means. And I heard you use that phrase on a video that I saw you talking on, and you said, there's no Pantone in this industry. And it was like, yeah, there isn't. It was like one of those things that was sort of really obvious. And in the same sentence, you started talking about something that you referred to as line locked. And I don't know if I, just missed the memo, but I never really had heard that terminology used like that before. And, as Leilani was just sort of alluding to, as a salon owner, like you change retail lines like that. But when it comes to color, you got to be so careful about changing color lines, because it's not just you that are line locked into a color line, but Mrs. Brown or Mrs. Smith or whatever her name's going to be, she is line locked into that exact tonal reflect with her, highlights or whatever it is. And so when you change color lines, you can lose clients if you're not careful. So the way you talked about that on the video that I saw, where you were talking about how you've used AI to get around this whole issue of color matching. And, if we went back in time 18 months ago when AI was just sort of, becoming mainstream, me and other people in the sort of media space were sort of going, oh my gosh, I wonder how AI is going to revolutionize hairdressing. And people were going, I think it's first of all going to have an impact on the color industry. And here it is, like big time it has. So just talk to us about your observations about line locked and that story we were talking about before we even got on this recording, where Leilani did, to explain it to you, she did a series of different products, all using their 6N, so to speak, because I think that really just explained it to someone like me who is a non-colorist but is a hairdresser.
Yes, yeah, yes. It was really I remember it all so vividly. Is as we went through, and I just to touch on the prior points, one of the things that I observed about Leilani when she was developing the color line is that she has incredibly high standards. And we did experience this point where we had a separation of the color, and and so we thought, boy, we're at risk. And honestly, developing a mixable professional hair color line is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I've built technologies that are used all around the world, and so it is by far the hardest thing. And I'm looking at Leilani there, who, as a stylist, has created her own mixable color line, which is something she can, put on her list of accomplishments is just phenomenal, right? And also, by the way, when we did that, shortly after that first formulation separated, we decided, boy, this is really hard. We should look at potentially buying an existing color line from a contract manufacturer. And so we went out and did an analysis of those. She concluded that she wouldn't put her name on those products.
Wow.
Why? Because the manufacturers would not guarantee us tonal replication from batch to batch, which means that the idea that we could deliver a high quality color line with exacting capabilities and consistent delivery was out the window, and she just wouldn't do it. She wouldn't put her name on it. And that I still, hold as one of our tenets, is that we won't deliver a product to market unless it's going to elevate our salons and stylist customers. So, super important consideration for her. And so onto the color mixability. So once we had developed the basic technology, we started going to industry conferences. And so I recall being on the floor one day And the salon owner came up and I started presenting the system. And of course, we've got our cans of color on top of the dispenser. We're talking about it, going through lots and lots of features. And there's so much value, by the way, it's almost difficult to present it because you could spend so long talking about each of the aspects of the system and what it does. But what universally happened is as I would finish my presentation, the salon owner would very consistently say, and you can use anybody's color, right? And I would say, I could tell that they didn't hear the first thing I said, which was we have our proprietary mixable color line. And so I would look at that and say, no, you have to use Clics colors. And the universal response was the shoulders drop, the head
Mm,
drops, they look down at the floor and they say, oh, changing colors hard.
mm,
And so I was seeing these reactions and realizing that we had a business problem, which is there's a lot of resistance, right, to adopting a new color line. So I went to Leilani and I said, what's going on here? So she went out and she got 6 different manufacturers, 6 ends. She swatched them on this standardized, what they call ISO cloth, which is a pure white cloth that's all every single swatch is standard, right? And you do it just like you do hair. You mix your formula, you put it on, you curate it just like hair, and then you look. And so she did that. She put them all up on a wall, and now I'm looking at them, and not a single one of them were close to one another.
mm,
One's a lighter brown, one's a darker brown, one's a little warmer reddish, one's a little cooler. And I realized, oh my gosh. And then the next level of learning was that it takes a stylist years to learn a color line because there is no standard.
mm,
And once they do, they never want to change
mm,
for obvious reasons, which is that, they could make their clients have a really bad hair day, which means they're crying and it's just not good, right?
mm.
And there's so much stress in that. And so that was an incredible aha moment to understand the fundamental problem. And so then we had to go into solutions mode. How do you solve for that, right? And what we ended up concluding was that we could actually train a neural network, an AI neural network, how to mix our color. So we started teaching it. That's how these things learn, right? They're kind of mimic your brain. And so we started mixing different combinations of colors, feeding it in, feeding it in, feeding it in, more and more and more data. And then all of a sudden it started getting good enough where it could predict if you use this much of this and this much of this and this much of this, that's the color you're going to get. And so we ended up perfecting that. We turned it into software, put it in the mobile app. So today, quite literally, for the first time ever, a stylist can make combinations of any one of these 30 components, and it'll literally show you on the mobile app what the color is that you've designed before you ever even dispense it. And so just, so
Mm.
that's how it worked.
Yeah, okay, that's really cool
So
because what we're saying is that if you're wanting to move from one color brand to another, that the differences are not insignificant, but
it's actually yeah, to go just a little bit deeper and then I'll and
yeah,
then I'll give you the really cool answer is that when you're dealing with paint, it's and you mix half again as much of a particular tone,
yeah,
you can predict the results because it's what they call in mathematics linear. You
hmm,
can see a straight line from point A to point B from on the color space and you know what you're going to get. But in oxidative hair color, when you've got a hydrogen peroxide catalyst mixing with a bunch of dyes, and there's that chemical efficacy for about an hour of time, right?
hmm,
That creates nonlinear jumps in tone depending on which combination of dyes you have, and it's a very subtle thing. So you make a minor mix, and stylists do this all day, right? They take pre-mixed color, then they
yeah,
squirt in multiple tubes. They can get kind of close, but every single one's going to be very different because the way these dyes bind together molecularly is like musical chairs. There's if you got this much dyes and this much dyes and those much dyes, they have to bind. And if there's no binding spot, those dice fall on the floor. It's like musical chairs, right? There's no
Mm.
place to sit. And those jumps are what creates that problem. So as we did all of that, and then we realized we could mix our color, we trained the neural network and we did all the course testing and it worked. Then we had an aha moment. And the aha moment was that we realized that even if a salon owner wanted to adopt Clics, colors, and technology because of all the economic benefits and all the efficiencies and all the data, stylists would resist. And you know this, they'll walk out. They'll have a walkout if they have to go through that kind of stress. So we thought, okay, it's not enough for us to have an AI app-based technology that lets people design colors from scratch. We have to be able to replicate the competitor's tones in order to make it efficient for stylists to transition.
And
So
that's
what
the
we then
that's the
did,
goal. That's the magic.
that's
That
the
bit
key.
there.
That's the
That's it
magic.
there. Yeah.
So we went out and we acquired tubes of all the major competitors' colors. We swatched them. We use this really special device called a spectrophotometer, which you put, just like I said before, you swatch the color onto that iso cloth, you put it in this device, which has a little hole in it, and there's a big clear white ball, pure white ball inside, and it gets bombarded with 35 different frequencies of light. That light hits that aperture with that tone on it, reflects all around inside that sphere, and then a bunch of sophisticated mathematics create a three-dimensional spot in space where you could literally see that color. So, and we can show you images now of 3D color and where any color would sit. So then we looked at our neural network AI and we said, okay, what Clics formula could match this tone?
Yeah.
And since you can't patent a color,
Mm.
we realized that we could digitize in our mobile app all of the major competitors' tones. And so a new stylist using Clics could literally go into the app, say conversions, pick the manufacturer that they're used to, pick
Mm.
the unique color
Yeah.
or colors that they're used to, dispense them, and it's Clics colors. It's a different, formula, but get the same tonal results. And so once we did that, we realized that we had solved what we call the line lock problem,
Yeah.
which was where stylists are shackled to a line and they never want to leave. And that's
Mm.
difficult for them because
Yeah.
it restricts their mobility. They can't go to another salon in a new location unless they use the same color without that really incredible learning curve.
Mm.
For salon owners, they can't recruit new stylists who aren't familiar with their particular line. And of course, you can't afford to carry so many multiple lines in any inventory depth because of the cost of all that cash tied up, right? And
Yeah.
all the wall space and all the challenges. So it was a incredible learning experience.
Mm.
And once I realized that, I became super passionate about of solving that problem for stylists because
Mm.
no one should live under fear, right, in their occupation and what they do for a living, that they're going to be able one day have to make a change that's going to cause them to upset all their customers.
Yeah. Well, it's that level of genius that you've brought to it, which I think is what separates, and I know you got a bit techie with it, but it's what separates why I think this will work where others have failed, because that's incredible what you've just described. I've got lots of things I need to touch on with you. Um, so we won't dig into quite so much detail, but there's other components to this that also bring some magic to it. We've talked a little bit about the app. Tell us about the smart bowl, the smart mixing bowl, because that's an important part of this whole thing.
Leilani, please.
So the smart bowl is it goes with the system. Of course, we had to design a bowl that would work with the system, because what that magic little smart bowl does is the dispenser knows that it's there. We have sensors in the dispensing area to know that it's been placed into the dispenser, that it's back far enough because of where the dispensing is at the top, and to make sure, and to the back as well. And so what we have in that smart bowl, though, is an RFID tag. And so what that RFID tag does is it tags that bowl and that formula to the stylist and to the client and it tells you how much is in that bowl. And so the great part of this and how we reduce the waste, because waste is so problematic, right, in the industry and has been for a very long time. What we can do is once you do that dispense for your client for the first time, you go ahead and you go into your application. And then if there is leftover product in the bowl, you take it back to the dispenser and place it back in the dispenser. And it will weigh how much is left over in the bowl. And what it does is automatically updates that client record. So the next time that the client comes back in, you'll have the perfect amount of product for that client. And so that is a patented feature of the system. It is very novel and new and doesn't exist except for with our technology. And so for me, it was like, that was like huge for me because again, waste was one of the number one things I wanted to get rid of was the amount of waste that we have, and it is profits going down the drain.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's very cool again. Charles, talk to me about the back office reporting. Just give us I know you've already touched on it when you talked about the vitamin company that you were involved with, but just sort of explain how the back office reporting works from the salon to back office and how the sort of auto shipping of product, how does that all work? Because again, that's quite revolutionary in the industry.
Yeah, it really is a neat piece of the system. And so being an information systems guy, right, because I came out of
Mm.
that part of the world, when Leilani, architected and built the system and defined and designed it, I thought, well, okay, we're able to collect some key pieces of information that can be built upon, right? So, for example, she talked about putting that smart bowl in, and there's a RFID tag. We then have an app, and the app identifies the salon, of course, the stylist, and the client, the formulas, the amount of those formulas. So we capture all that data. Then the formula goes to the dispenser, dispenses into the bowl. The dispenser is an electronic device, and so it's actually tracking down to a fraction of a gram for each of those components what goes in. So what we realized we could do is could record all that information and put it into an online reporting system so that at the end of the day, a salon owner could log into their account or use their phone, and they could see every client, every dispense, every formula, how much it was, who dispensed it, when they dispensed it, and one other really cool thing. So now we got all this data, but then we thought, okay, how could we advance this even further? We learned that we could put a unique barcode on the label on every single canister product so that beginning at the point of manufacturing origin, we would know exactly what was in the warehouse of color product so that then those canisters would be shipped to the salon. And when those canisters went into the dispenser would read the barcode off of each canister uniquely and say, okay, this is now in inventory in the machine. Then it would track as that color is dispensed out of each canister and say, okay, this one is now empty. So we track it from womb to tomb, each unique canister in the system, and then the system to the inventory management portion just automatically, right, creates a new inventory order, and our system automatically fulfills that color for the salon. So quite literally, you never have to do inventory ordering again because it just completely automated
Mm.
the process. It knows what you need and auto fulfills.
I love womb to tomb.
Yeah.
What a great expression. Sorry, Leilani, what
I
were you
saw,
going to say there?
I saw you smile. That was funny.
Yeah.
So if I could just jump in real quick, one of the ways that we save you money too, by the way, that Charles just described that though, Anthony, is all stylists mix at least 2 tubes together.
Mm.
So what we're doing is we're letting you buy a small portion of another tube. So you don't have to buy 2 tubes or 3 tubes to create that formula. You can just buy like 2 or 3 grams out of 3 or 4 different cans. And so that is how we get that custom blend for you. But you don't have to outlay $21 for 3 tubes to be able to create that color.
Yeah. Yeah. Got
So
it.
that's kind of a something that is not very, like, people don't think of it in that term. And so I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out, because it's huge. We're selling it
Mm.
by, the slice and not by the pie, to,
Yeah. Yeah.
use an analogy with pizza. So
Yeah, and if I could, let me just kind of elaborate on that, because one of the things that we realized once we did that barcode and we knew that we could see all the inventory out at the salon locations, we thought, what if we changed our business model up completely, or the industry's model, and rather than to make salons buy the color up front, we charge them only for what they dispense after they dispense it and get paid by their customer. In other words, taking salons cash flow positive for their hair color.
Hmm.
And so what she alluded to is our business model now, where we supply the color at no cost to the salon. As the stylist dispense, we track the color that comes out of each of those canisters down to a fraction of the gram. And then at the end of each day, in the middle of the night while everybody's sleeping, the computers say, okay, how much did they dispense? What does it cost? And then we automatically go out and debit a bank account or credit card that the salon sets up in their system, in their account automatically. And so they pay for the color after they've dispensed it, only for amount that they purchase, right? Complete breakthrough, complete
Totally.
change of
Mm.
model.
Mm.
And to Leilani's really important but subtle point, because hair color is oxidative, and when you crack those tubes open, that people have a tendency not to want to use them, even if they're only using a little part of one, because they're mixing it to get a tone that they're trying to approximate,
Mm.
right? Even though it's difficult to do. And so now, if you need a little bit of green or a little bit of red or a little bit of blue, and you squirt literally half a gram, you only pay for half a gram, and the
Mm.
rest of the color that's in that canister is protected and not going to be wasted.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask you about the pricing thing because I read on your website something about you lease that you pay a daily lease fee for
For the
the
machine, yeah,
machine, so
the
to speak,
dispenser, yeah,
at the
yeah,
dispenser, and then you pay for the color by the gram. As you just said, that is like there's no one else even remotely doing something like that. So that is
no,
very revolutionary. One of the things I was thinking about with this was that the industry is changing all over the world, and that there's becoming a lot more self-employed, a lot more business unit
mhm,
of one. So I'm curious as to how suitable this is for the solo operator. Where in the past they'd just go to the distributor, they'd see I've got Mary and Janison today, and they get a tube of this and a tube of that, and they're literally just working that way. Just give us a sort of brief overview of how you see that fitting in.
yeah. That's been a really dramatic shift that in the United States was even further propagated by the pandemic, right? And
Mm,
so stylists moving into the salon suites environment and working for themselves. We're entrepreneurs, and so we love entrepreneurial spirit, whether it's a salon owner, right, who's growing a business, or whether it's an independent. But if you think about it, the independent stylist, their problems of inventory management are even more acute. They cannot afford a whole wall worth of tube art, right?
mm,
And so they have to be very careful with their cash, with what they maintain, and and so how much inventory is the right amount of inventory? And one of the great things that Leilani said to me along the way, and as I've really resonated, is when your customer comes in and they feel like a change, right? They want to go from brunette to blonde, let's say, but you're used to treating them as a brunette, and you don't have the right products on the shelf, and you have to talk them out of it just because you don't have the right inventory. Her quote is, if you don't change them, they'll change you,
mm,
right? And so how does a stylist be prepared for that? Well, the click system unlocks the color space and lets you design millions of colors with just 30 components that you haven't had to pay for until you've dispensed the color. And so it literally, maximizes your available color to service your clients as they desire at any given moment in time, right? And doesn't tie up your cash in the process.
Right, so it's just as applicable. A salon suite, business unit of one.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
size wise, I mean, I've seen on video the machine, the dispenser. Size wise,
yeah.
how big is it? What would you compare it to?
Yeah, yeah, great question. When we first started doing this, we decided that we were going to build a large machine, sizable, like
Mm,
about a 26-inch by 27-inch by
mm,
16 high, dispenser
yeah,
that would hold 50 canisters of color. That's enough for a large salon to service customers for about 2 weeks. It's a
yeah.
lot of color. And to build all of the technical complexity that goes with a large scale salon environment, and then work backwards from there. So the first machine we built was a 50 slot machine. And then we decided, okay, now let's go start working on the smaller salons, the independents, the ones who really have tight space. So then we built a 35 slot machine, which is much, much smaller, right? It's about 21 inches by 22 inches by 16 high.
Wow.
So small bread box.
Mm,
And now we have our
mm,
third version in design, which is actually going to be down to 27 slots, and it's going to be a 16-inch platter inside, Lazy Susan, if you want to think of it that way,
mm,
that
mm.
holds all the color canisters. So very small, fit anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. So it's sort of microwave size by the sound of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, very
Wow.
much so.
That's
Yeah.
that's incredible. I love tube art as well. So you got all the expressions there. Womb to tomb and tube art. I've got both of them. I think they're fantastic. Look, we need to start wrapping up, but two things before we do so. First one is what markets is Clics currently available in?
Currently, we are in North America only, Anthony, but we do have plans to go global, honestly, because becoming a global brand is going to bring this amazing technology to everybody, and
Mm,
it's also it's eco-friendly. I'm not going to say that that's our whole business model, but when you think about 1 billion tubes going into our landfills every year, these
wow.
recyclable canisters
Mm,
are it's a small step in the right direction, but we're proud of that, and so we'd love to be able to bring it to the globe, of course. But yes, currently we are in the United States with plans to be in Canada
right.
probably in 2026.
Right. Okay. And very last thing, I know we started this before we started recording. Actually, we began this conversation, and I thought, oh, we'll hang on to that until the end. And that is that I know you now have a relationship with Car Goldwell. Do you want to just talk to us about what that looks like and how that works? Because it sort of goes back to what you were saying before, Charles, about how you'd be at these shows, and people would come up to you and say, and what you can use any product, can you? And the answer was no. But tell us about
Mhm.
this relationship you've got with Goldwell.
Sure. And this story is another one of those serendipity, how did this happen kind of things. So when Leilani and I formed the business and we were fleshing out the business strategy, we thought to ourselves, we could be kind of like Uber, of hair color. In other words, Uber is a taxi company that doesn't own any taxis.
Taxis. Yeah.
We could be a hair color company that doesn't own any hair color. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, we could dispense for the other leading color manufacturers. And we
Mm.
thought, that makes an awful lot of sense because what we've really developed, this platform, is creates enormous efficiencies. And so why not, to Leilani's point of ecological benefit, push those efficiencies out to the world as quickly as you possibly can, right, to get those benefits. And so what we realized, because we didn't know what we didn't know yet, that if we were to go to the leading manufacturers and say, hey, you should use our platform because we can reduce just the amount of color needed by 30%, that they would say, go away because nobody wants to reduce their revenue by
Mm.
30%, right?
Yeah.
We,
Yeah.
we didn't know that we could add these other forms of value that would make up for, those lost, revenue and profits, right? The information you get, all the other benefits. And so we decided we have to build our own color line. and we're going to have to give the big guys some bloody noses before they'll pay attention to us.
Mm.
And that's really what launched us on the creation of Clics Colors. And I'm certainly very, very glad we did it. But in the process, I asked Leilani, okay, go find us a manufacturer. And within 3 days, it was a pretty amazing result. She came back and said, oh, I got these three lined up. And we got on the phone. We started talking to them. One of them, the vice president of business development we were on the phone with, was incredibly articulate, super smart. As we talked about what we were trying to do, and we were trying, Anthony, to be coy because we didn't want to let the cat out of the bag quite yet. It became clear that he knew so much and had some knowledge that wasn't quite clear why. And so we made the decision, okay, let's do a little more reveal. And finally we said, okay, look, we're building this dispenser technology. We want to use these pressurized canisters that were invented by Goldwell and patented back in the 80s. And he said, well, guess what? He said, we used to be owned by Goldwell, our manufacturing plant, and we have one of the two machines in the world that can put color in those canisters. When Cal bought Goldwell, they consolidated production of the color into Germany. They sold the plant in Baltimore to a industrialist who turned it into a contract beauty products manufacturer. We've been restricted from putting color in these canisters with this factory platform until the patent ran out, which was 3 weeks ago.
Wow. Okay.
Unbelievable,
Yeah, yeah,
unbelievable. So
yeah.
the one factory in the world
Mm,
that could put this color into those canisters
mm.
appeared before us 3 weeks after the patent had
Yeah, yeah.
expired.
Meant to happen.
And it was just meant to
Yeah.
happen. And so we, got on a plane, we visited, we built a partnership with them, and they produce our color
Okay. Well, look, that's
completely.
fantastic. It's been very, very interesting. So we need to start wrapping up. But before we do, where can people connect with you? Website, Instagram, other social media channels. Where would you like to point them towards?
Our website is clics.com. That's a pretty simple one. Our Instagram is at clicscolors. And then I also have an Instagram at clicsprez. And yeah, that's where you can find us and you can see the creations that our salons are making and posting up and follow along with what we're doing here at Clics.
Great. Okay. And that's Clics without the K for anyone who hasn't figured that out. CLICS. Yeah.
There you go.
So,
Right.
okay, look, I'll put those links in the show notes for today's podcast. If you're listening to this podcast with Leilani and Charles and you've enjoyed it, then do me a favor and share it with people that you know who would also enjoy it. Because, if color's your thing, it's important to be aware of what's happening in the world of color. And AI is infiltrating everything. And this is a fantastic example of how it's infiltrating, the salon business. And you need to know about it because it's revolutionary in its approach. So look, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a rating and review on the Apple Podcast app. So to wrap up, Leilani and Charles, thank you for being on this week's episode of the Grow My Salon Business podcast.
Thank you, Anthony. Really appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Anthony, for what you do for the industry. We appreciate
It's been fantastic having this conversation. I appreciate your time.